Hey, Seth, welcome to the It Is Time to Stand Up podcast. I am super excited when I found out you were going to be here at the NRB for us to sit down and have a conversation. You're a pro-life advocate, and I'm just so impressed by the way that you attack the arguments, which sanctity of life is so important.
Yep.
I thought we would start this conversation kind of with some history because I don't think everyone knows the history of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood and how it's even tied to what's happening in the schools and sexuality today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's pretty dark. It's pretty disgusting. And appreciate your voice and podcast. It's time to stand up. It reminds me of my friend Heidi St. John's podcast, Off the Bench.
yeah,
So we need to get off the bench and we need to stand up. And I appreciate your voice. And so thanks for the opportunity.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, firstly, I'm a dude, right? So I don't have a uterus. So I should shut up. I've been told it's her body, her choice. No uterus, no opinion. Of course, Misty, that's a dangerous thing to assume in the age of Bruce Jenner.
Right.
I might be a woman, and so I have just as much authority to speak to the issue. I mean, our culture is so insane now.
It's so crazy.
We don't even know how to communicate anymore. It's as if we're speaking a different language. And what we focus on at the White Rose Resistance is to really fulfill Ephesians 5:11, which
Yeah.
says, "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness,
Yes.
but rather expose them."
Yes.
And yeah, in about 40 pulpits in the last 2.5 years, the number one response I've gotten from godly, Jesus-loving, pro-life believers is, Seth, I've never heard any of that before.
Wow.
We actually don't understand our culture. Most Christians don't understand the times we're living in.
That's right.
And so when you don't understand the times you're living in, you don't understand the ideologies, the ideas, the worldviews
That's right.
that are driving the culture, that are animating the culture of death, that are justifying the kind of the evils that we're seeing play out in our schools, on children,
The attack on
the
families,
attack
on the
family,
unborn.
the gender insanity stuff, women's space is no longer safe, states codifying abortion through point of birth into their state constitution. Like it's for most Christians, Misty, it's hard for them to put language to. It seems so evil. For them, it seems unprecedented. Now, none of actually what we're experiencing is unprecedented
Well, and if you
historically.
read
but
your
for
Bible
them,
and you
that's
look
right.
at the times, then you should be able to discern
Yeah.
the times you're living in.
But we've been enjoying the fruits of freedom and liberty for so long in America
Yes.
that we kind of start to take it for granted.
Yeah.
And I think some of us assume it'll be perpetual. The liberty and freedom will just last forever.
That's right.
But it won't, and it
No.
never has. And so I try to help give people language for what's happening to then get them engaged. There's this great verse in First Chronicles. It talks about the sons of Issachar.
Yes.
And all
knew
it
the
says
seasons.
is that
Yeah.
they understood the times
And the
that they
seasons.
lived
Uh-huh.
in. And so they knew what Israel ought to do.
Yes.
So what's the inverse of that then? It would be that if you don't understand the times, then you don't know what the people of God ought to do.
Right.
And so that's all we know about the sons of Issachar, but it's come to really represent a lot of our mission and who we are at the White Rose Resistance to equip the church
I love it.
to understand the times so that so you can just pontificate and get puffed up with knowledge, so that you know what the people of God ought to do.
That's right.
And so, yes, we're a pro-life organization. We're the fastest growing pro-life organization in America right now. But we connect a lot more of the ideologies that animate the culture of death because the revolutionaries on the left, who have literally, I say, architected this culture that has so many moms and dads kind of freaked out right now.
Yeah.
There were architects of the culture of death who were very dogmatic and zealous for their pagan religion and to usher that in to every facet of society to tear down and replace Christendom, to replace
That's right.
Christianity. Once you start to understand the history of some of these ideologies and some of these individuals, the scales fall from your eyes.
Yes.
And you're able to see how spiritual, and may I say even actually demonic, aspects of the culture war was that so many Christians don't want to engage in, right? Because they say things like, Misty, like, I just preach the gospel.
Right.
And I don't want to do the culture war thing. Well, what believers are failing to recognize is that the culture war, it was a proxy war
That's right.
for a far deeper spiritual war.
That's
Those
right.
spiritual principalities and realities were manifesting in the cultural, political, and social realm. But as Christians abdicated those spheres of influence, those
Right.
institutions of power and influence, well, evil men just took up the reins that we let go of because we were too pious and self-righteous to get our hands dirty in the dirty business.
Or
of
we didn't want to
politics.
offend anyone.
Yeah.
We wanted to love everyone.
So that's my preface to
Yeah, I
your
love it.
question of like, what the hell's going on and how do we get here? Well, there were architects of the culture of death, and My contention is this, that there is no single more influential woman, and there is no single more influential organization whose legacy on what's unfolding now is greater than Margaret Sanger and her organization, Planned Parenthood. And if you're hearing this, you're probably like, what the heck?
I thought that's women's health
How can
care.
you make that claim? Planned Parenthood is, yeah, I know, I heard they do abortions, but like, are you saying Planned Parenthood has a singular greater influence on our kooky, out of control culture of death right now than any other organization in the last 100 years? Yes, that's actually my contention. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I would humbly propose to you, if you're listening to this and you love Misty's podcast, that maybe you don't understand the times and you don't know how this culture was created. And I'm not judging you. I didn't years ago, and that's why I started studying. It's very important for us to take responsibility for this republic, because it's we the people.
That's right.
And so that means actually that you've been given something that you're supposed to steward, the gift of freedom and liberty. And if you don't steward it, other men will for wickedness. And so this woman named Margaret Sanger in 1914 starts writing vile, pornographic filth on the sexual revolution, on women's sexual liberation. She was sleeping around, she was cheating on her husband while she had kids, and she started writing about birth control. Now, a lot of people don't know this, Missy. Sanger actually coined the term birth control. So contraception was a term for a long time, but the term birth control was created, coined, invented by the founder of Planned Parenthood. And let me just say this, she did not want to help poor minorities control their birthing so that they could be better parents to the children they had already birthed, because she just really had a beating, loving heart for the poor minorities, and she just didn't want them to accidentally reproduce too many kids that could outpace their ability to provide for. Nope. Birth control meant controlling the births of those that she didn't think were fit to reproduce.
Right.
And
Sounds like we've heard that somewhere before
this
too.
movement is called eugenics.
Yeah.
Okay, it's called eugenics. If you're thinking of Mao Zedong, Hitler, Mussolini, and Pol Pot, good job. Or Adolf Hitler, that's all eugenics, but a lot of people actually don't know what eugenics means. The root word of eugenics means good in birth. Well, if eugenics means good in birth, then what does that mean? That some people are not good in birth. So there are good genes and bad genes, not genes, guys, you know, G-E-N-E-S.
Yeah.
There are good genes and bad genes. There are people with good qualities that we want to have reproduced in the human species. And there's other people that maybe we don't, maybe we should sterilize them so they can't have children. And so epileptics, a lot of blacks, Jews, alcoholics, criminals, the mentally and physically disabled people. These would be the kind of people that Sanger would have said we need to sterilize, so they cannot reproduce.
Right.
Because they are, to quote Hitler, Lebensunwertensleben, which means life unworthy of life. They're unwanted, they're undesirables, okay? So Sanger actually helped architect the eugenics movement in America. She said things like this. If you're thinking I'm a crazy weirdo and you're like, prove it, Seth, prove it. All right, here's a quote from Sanger. She said, quote, birth control is not contraception thoughtlessly and indiscriminately practiced. It means the cultivation and release of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks, those human weeds, which threaten the blossoming of the finest flowers of American civilization. Okay, she's not talking about flora and fauna. You understand what I'm talking about?
Right.
She's talking about human beings, image bearers.
The ones
of
that are
God,
all in the image
she's
of
calling
God.
human
Yes.
weeds and
Yes.
defective stocks.
Yeah.
And it's those human weeds that are preventing the blossoming of the people we want reproducing, the fine flowers, right? Which would be like rich white people or people who had no history of alcoholism or criminal or no biological defects. Oh, we want them to have. So you just need to understand, if you're listening to this, guys, that is the roots of where Planned Parenthood was created. It was out of the eugenics movement. Most of her board members were rabid eugenicists or racists. She had a board member named Lothrop Stoddard, who was a high official of the Massachusetts Ku Klux Klan. Lothrop Stoddard, the first board member of the American Birth Control League, later renamed Planned Parenthood. Lothrop Stoddard wrote a book called The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. And Hitler, in jail after his failed coup attempt in Munich, was poring over the writings of Lothrop Stoddard and other of Margaret Sanger's best friends, whose ideas actually helped create the eugenics laws that would be on the books in the Third Reich, and some of their sterilization laws. So I'm only just barely scratching the surface.
I know,
but you need to understand that's the sort of ideological cesspool in which Margaret Sanger swam, and the American Birth Control League, later renamed Planned Parenthood is the organization she founded for the express purpose of weeding out of the human population what she called the morons and the misfits, the undesirables, the defectives, the human weeds, so that she could usher in the Übermenschen, which means the master
Superman,
race,
right?
the Superman,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Not the Untermenschen, which means subhuman, and it's actually a phrase that Alfred Rosenberg, Hitler's chief racial theorist, got from a book written by Lothrop Stoddard, her first board member at Planned Parenthood.
Yeah. Okay. So on this, there's so much that we could cover, and we're not going to have time. So I'm going to encourage you, find Seth, follow the White Rose Resistance, all of those things, because he literally is just scratching the surface. And if we don't understand our history, then we are doomed to fail. So we have to be educated. On this show, what I want to do is I not only want to call people to courage and conviction to stand up for their faith, but I also want to help them do something about their faith. So faith without works is dead. We know that.
Yep.
What can people do? How can they get involved with what you're doing? What projects do you have coming up? How can we support you? I think that's where we should take this interview. Y'all, the sky is on fire. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Misty. Yes, so we're the fastest growing pro-life organization in America now. We were launched right after the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And our goal is to put ourselves out of a job by reawakening the church in America again to fulfill her spiritual obligation of removing all the idols from the land, of tearing down the high places of child sacrifice. What we're facing right now with the weird sex stuff in the schools and the baby killing and all this stuff, it's no different than
it's Old Testament. It's Old Testament, yeah.
They worship the same kind of gods,
Baal and
the same
Moloch
kind of behaviors
yeah.
that we're seeing today. We just think that we've progressed and advanced beyond our need for religion in America. But because man is fundamentally a religious being, we end up living very religiously while we deny that there's any eternal reality or God. And so when you rip God from the society, guess what? We just go right back to demon worship. We just kind of do the things that all the pagans before us always did, absent a Christian worldview, absent a recognition of our Creator. And so what we're trying to do is actually get the church back into the public square.
Good.
So we're launching resistance circles now all around the country. We're interviewing for regional coordinators, and we have national leadership at our organization to provide the training, education, equipping, and mobilization to get the church out of their off the bench, to stand up, to get them out of their comfortable congregations and caves, and actually start getting involved in the public square, which means outside of abortion centers, pleading with moms to choose life. And we have all the kind of training for all of this, to get them trained to speak at school board meetings against Planned Parenthood's pornographic sex ed that's being pushed into the schools, to do public activism events in the public square. And resistance is going to look different in every state because of the change in laws with the overturning of Roe. It goes back to the states and all of this. But yeah, if you want to get involved with White Rose Resistance, what we exist to do is equip and mobilize you, church, to be the resistance. And so if you join at $35 a month as an ally, you join our digital private community where you get pro-life courses, curriculum, training, quizzes, live calls with me, live calls with special guests. And we send you a resistance box to welcome you into the resistance so you can represent resistance and be able to speak on behalf of the unborn and against the evil that we see. And then we have a movie coming out this summer. It's called The 1916 Project, which is when Sanger opens up her first brick and mortar Planned Parenthood clinic in 1916. That's the beginning of what is today the largest, best funded, and most profitable 501c3 in human history, the largest abortion provider in the world, the largest provider of pornographic comprehensive sex ed, and the second largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers in America. I bet you didn't know that, Christian. Planned Parenthood, the baby killing organization, is now the second largest provider of transgender drugs in America. It's their fastest growing revenue stream right now. It's about to outpace how much they make on killing babies. That's one organization created by probably one of the most demonically inspired revolutionaries on the left in the last 100 years in America, whose legacy on today of what's unfolding before our eyes, affecting our children and country, cannot be overstated. And so join the White Rose Resistance. But what should you be doing beyond that? Well, you need to read books. You need to get educated. Subscribe to my podcast, Unaborted, although we're about to rebrand to the Seth Gruber Show. Listen to the interviews we have with people. We dive deep into these ideas so that you can understand. At $70 a month, we actually have a book club. So we read books together and we talk about it live on Zoom.
Love that.
If that's of interest to you. You should be supporting your local pregnancy resource center. You should be asking your pastor what he's doing to defend life and speak on life from the pulpit? What is his church doing for women who might be facing unplanned pregnancies? Do the women in his city know that there are Christians in churches who are safe places for her to go,
Yes.
where she won't be shamed and condemned, but welcomed and celebrated in the church?
Right.
What's your church doing to support life?
Yeah.
Does anyone in your church stand outside of an abortion center and graciously plead with mom to choose life? There's training for all of this.
Yes.
These are some of the things you should be doing. And lastly, if you're not voting pro-life, if you're not voting to protect the preborn child, honestly, you're lazy. I don't know how else to put it. This is America, where we determine who governs us, and when we determine who governs us, the kind of laws that they pass. If you care about the unborn child and you do not vote, the simplest thing possible to show up and vote so that we can protect the preborn, what are you doing?
And
So
I
these
have
are some
found,
of the things you can do.
yeah, and I have found if you vote pro-life, every other issue for a Christian is probably going to fall into a line as well.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that you said that. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the resistance. So excited to have you on the show today. Y'all, it is time for us to get off the sidelines. It's time to get off the bench. It's time for us to stand up. Thank you so much for being here today.
Amen. Keep it up, Misty.
Yeah.